Okay, how to assemble the Black Edition 60-volt Ecomopeds. If you've already taken a look at the unboxing video, I've pretty much done everything as it was before. I took the items out of the basket, like the pedals, the charger, the mirrors, pulled out the rack for the rear, the fender, the wheel, cleaned the packing grease around the inside of the brake drum so you actually have traction on the brake shoes. Set the bike up on a stand, blocks of wood, milk carton. I already went through it and refabricated the battery pack. This one came with the batteries installed, but you can see the battery construction video on how to work. The bike will run without the instrument cluster or the headlight attached to the bike. The turn signals and brake lights and such will do it. You attach the battery to the bike, click it one click forward, it locks the post into the frame, lock the battery to the frame. Secondly, with this plastic slider, there's a key switch in the back, and you can click it one click forward. You can see tail light comes on. You can actually see that the motor actually runs for the first time all by its own. It'd be a good idea to go ahead and charge the battery while you're assembling the bike, so you're ready to ride once you're done assembling. Should be about 2 hours, 3 hours. Go ahead and turn the bike off. Separate out the key. You don't have to turn it all the way to the left position, unlock the battery. It's easy to get that little peg in there jammed. Bike comes with an alarm fob with arm, disarm, panic, and shut up mode. I'm going to disarm it. Set the keys to the side here. The bike comes with a 2 ampere charger for 12 amp hour batteries. It's a smart charger. You can't overcharge the battery. You plug it into the bike first before you plug it into the electricity supply. Looks like a power cord for 110 volts. It's not. Then you plug the charger into a 110 volt power supply. And you'll see that it has a power light that tells you that it's on. The charge light's red until the battery's fully charged, and it'll turn green. The bike should be charged at least once every 3 months while it's in storage. The alarm system pulls a trickle amount of electricity off the bike, so it eventually will bleed the batteries dry. But it's a nominal amount of electricity. Survey the bike, make sure there's any cracks, dings, bends. I noticed something right off the bat. The little horn was, it can sometimes come with it bent backwards. It's on a thin piece of sheet metal. Insert the handlebars. Tighten this nut until it's finger tight so you can align it with the wheel. And then we'll put the front wheel on. Then we'll put the seat on, the rear rack, the tail light, the pedals. And then it's a matter of going through the bike and making sure that all the fasteners that attach to plastic are fixed. Adjust the front brakes, the rear brakes. Make sure the bearing lock is locked for the crank and that the crank nuts are locked down tight. Check things like the stand, the nuts to hold the stand on there. The few nuts, bolts, and screws to hold the reflector and mud flaps onto the front and rear fender. And then you can pretty much be ready for a test drive. I guess right off the bat, first thing is you need a selection of tools. You need an assortment of metric wrenches from 8, 10, 12, 13, 14 millimeter, and some sockets. A pair of pliers, standard screwdriver, flathead screwdriver for aligning parts, side cutters to cut a few zip ties, and a hex key to tighten the accessories on the handlebars down. We'll put the plastic on the top last. After you unpack the bike, you roll little pieces of tape, gummy worms, what have you, out of there. Clean the inside of the brake drum from the shipping grease. Make sure that the bearings are pressed in nice and flat on each side of the wheel. Make sure the bearings rotate. Yes, they do. This is very important on the front and rear wheel. This lock nut holds the inner tube on the inside of the rim, and you want to make sure that lock nut is fixed down with about 10 or 15 foot-pounds of torque before you inflate the tire. And the inflation is marked right here on the side of the tire. It's a DOT rated. It says inflate to 33 pounds. Where's it at? It must be on the back side. This is a, there it is. 254 pounds load at 33 psi. The front wheel is a 225 by 17. The rear wheel is a 250 at 17. The rim tape, if you need a section of rim tape to replace with the tube, we do have tubes and tires and rim tape in stock. It is a 17-inch rim, basically. It's made out of alloy. It's cast aluminum. It's been machined. And it comes with all the brake hardener, brake fasteners, hardware. It's all on the front axle. So you take the lock nut off, and I'll show you the sequence of the fasteners. You'll need both hands free, maybe even a partner to help align everything. First, take the axle out, set the fasteners aside. It's really difficult to put this on with the wheel with the brake cable attached. There's a little 14mm nut on the end here with the retention spring. You need to just pull the brake arm a little farther forward, spin this nut off. The cable's got a threaded shaft on the end of it here, and you just retract the cable with the spring. That peg comes out. Set these off to the side so you can put the brakes back together and adjust them. And the brake cable comes out, you just let it hang free. Each side of the bike needs a set of fasteners to hold it in place. As you can see on the front forks here, this is where the fender is attached. This is where the axle retainer stays to keep the bike axle from coming out if the front nut ever does get loose. It should never get that loose. There's a washer in front of it that holds it on there with the axle shaft on this side, just for example. The fastener hardware is a little tight. Might need just a little bit of English on that. Let's see, oh, this one goes on that side. Okay. Bear with me. This is the second time they changed the fastener since last year. Okay, one side of the retainers goes on the left side of the bike, and it's oval shaped with flat edges, and it goes on this side of the bike. This one's completely round and will easily slide onto the shaft. So you have a thrust washer, a retainer. This notch fits up inside like that. The bike, there's a spacer that comes with the bike. There's two of them. One is wider, one is skinnier. And if I remember correctly, the one that is skinnier goes on this side. The one that is fatter goes on the left-hand side. You need to put the brake retainer fork retainer hardware on its washer, and just spin that nut on the end just a couple turns. So that's how the brake hardware is supposed to go through the front hub of the bike, and then you install it. There's a peg here that lines up with this brake hardware with the axle, and it all goes together as one piece. So basically you're going to have about both hands full plus a shin to levitate the tire, or have somebody hold the wheel so you can get it all aligned and installed in the bike. And then just finger tighten it down, get the bike down on the ground, then worry about torquing the nuts. Otherwise you might rock the bike off its stand. The brake drums are pretty straightforward. They're just standard moped. These are thicker from last year. You can see they already did a couple test runs at the plant with it. And you want to clean the surface of those, make sure there's no grease on them. They shipped this separately on the bike. It was tucked up underneath the this bracket for the basket. So you take the wheel. Let me make sure I got the right angle and dangle there. Take your left side fasteners off and spacer. Put the right hand side spacer equipment through the axle, through the hole, through the brake hardware, comes through to the left hand side. The left hand thicker spacer. I'll have to measure it later and put it in the end of the video. This is that funny oval shaped retainer, goes on the left hand side. It's thrust washer and a lock nut. Just a couple turns just to hold everything together. Pick up the wheel, scoot forward, align it underneath the front tongues, push the axle bolt as far as you can to the right. Now you'll notice on the shaft here there's a skinnier beveled edge. That's going to go up in the tongues, the tongue of the forks. We'll do that side first, then we'll worry about getting it lined up on the left hand side. The first thing you want to do is get the retainer and the washer on the outside of the fork. Line up that notch on the brake on that side. Push that in just a little bit. Just have this little spacer on the left hand side. Let's make this easy peasy. So you can see the spacers hold the wheel in the bike so it's equidistant to the center line of the bike. You see the center line of the tire going to the center line of the frame. You want the spacers to match up. So it looks like the wider spacer goes on the right hand side. Let's double check. So you hoist the wheel up, make sure it's in the forks, the spacers are there. Push the bolt all the way to the left. You can see how the retainer holds the wheel from coming down. The post on the fork is lined up with the brake drum hardware. On this side, you would put the retainer, washer, and lock nut. And like I say, you just torsion this down until it's tight enough to hold the whole thing together and not allow it to fall out. Now, does the spacer line up with the center wheel, center line of the frame? And does this wheel spin true? For the most part, yes. You might need just a little bit of adjustment of the spokes. Check the spokes, make sure they're nice and tight. There's nothing loose. There's no cracks in the hub or anything like that. The bearings are pretty much sealed, so you don't need to lubricate them. Besides, you don't want a lot of grease down here anyway, because it's going to pick up road debris and then it just turns it into an abrasive paste anyway. The nice thing about aluminum is once it oxidizes, it's not going to get any duller. It's not going to rust. The axle's phosphor bronze, so it won't rust either. So that's how you attach the front wheel to the bike. Then you can focus on the brake hardware itself, and you just do the reverse of what you just took apart. So put the brake cable through the guide here. There's a bracket up here that holds the brake cable against the bottom of the triple tree. This threaded shaft goes through this peg that's held by, there's the brake arm. There's return springs on the brake shoes themselves. So you just put the peg through the front tines, put the spring on the threaded shaft. There's no way under, it's uniform. It doesn't matter which way you put the spring on. The spring is a little bit stiffer than last year's, which I find is great because it's actually going to separate the brake shoes a lot easier. But it is possible to do it with just your fingers or a pair of pliers. I'll line up the threaded shaft so it goes through that peg, and then all you have to do is just rock the peg back, hold it with the screwdriver, a pair of pliers, and then thread the adjuster nut onto the threaded shaft. And that's how you install the brakes. Now, the wheel spins pretty much free by itself with the shoes dragging on the drum. You want to adjust this lock nut until the wheel is just turning, so it isn't with the cable released. So it doesn't drag the brake shoes on the drum. You can pull up on the spring a little bit, or you can adjust it with a 14mm socket if you don't have the finger strength for it. So just torque it until the wheel basically starts dragging on the brake shoes. You'll hear it, it'll be making a shick 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 sound. We've got a ways to go. There it goes. You can hear the brake just barely drag on the brake shoe. That means it's getting really close to being adjusted. So just back it off a click until it spins freely. Nope. One more click. There it goes. Bring up your wheel hardware, finger tighten it. You'll need a 14mm wrench and a 14mm socket. Like I said, don't go crazy on the torque. You don't want the bike to rock off the stand. Just 10 or 20 foot-pounds just to hold it together until you get it on the ground. Then you can take the bike off of its stand. It's a lot more stable to work on that way. Then you can work on things that require a serious amount of torque, like locking the wheel and putting the fender on.
Hi, how you doing?
And you lower the bike.
Bike shop coming.
I'm recording right now, thank you.
Oh.